As I've talked about before, in the Tales from the Pizzaplex story, Didophobia, we learn that Rory was a victim of the experiments shown off in Sister Location's private room. But was he the only one to go through the experiments? The wording is kind of vague about it. First, the story says that the whole thing was a nasty experiment designed to study the effects of ongoing fear in children. Then, immediately after, it says that whoever was behind the experiment wanted to see what happened if a child faced the same horrors night after night after night, blah da 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 da. When the live read of the story happened on the Discord server, it was said that Rory was the last in a series of children who got experimented on, and that seems to still be the consensus among the community. But just as I showed, the story itself never makes that clear. So, I thought I'd take a look through the rest of the franchise to see if there's any validity to this idea, and to do so, we'd need to find someone else who went through these experiments. Luckily, I was able to find quite a few candidates. The first and most obvious of these candidates is the crying child. The room has his toy telephone in it. There's a rare but official poster of him fending off the nightmare animatronics. And the character encyclopedia outright states that he's been tormented by the nightmares. He also has a voice that speaks to him, trying to gain his trust and send him where he's supposed to be, just like Rory. It certainly raises some questions about William's motives this early in the timeline, ones that I tried to address in this earlier video, but whether or not that video has any truth to it at all, the evidence here is really solid either way. I think I can say with confidence that the crying child was, in fact, an experiment victim, presumably the first of them. Well, that was fast. Mystery resolved. There was more than one victim. But what if there were more than two? Okay, look, I just want an excuse to talk about more candidates. I've still got 3 more, after all, with each being more interesting than the last, in my opinion. The next one we have is Michael Afton. We know he's the player in the 4th game, thanks to the reversed phone call and the drawing in the logbook. So surely he was also an experiment victim, right? I actually don't think so. At the time that Mike is experiencing this, he'd be an adult, since he considers them recent dreams in the logbook. Also, Nightmare Fredbear and Nightmare were never in the experiments. And what Mike went through in the game is far more elaborate than what Rory went through. Rory was stuck to the bed the whole time. He had no way to defend himself. Mike's experience pulls from his time as a night guard, allowing himself to fend off the nightmares. I think it's more likely that Shadow Freddy, which is what Nightmare is said to be in the files, followed Mike home and tormented him with a mix of his FNAF 1 experiences and the torment his little brother went through. And the reason I don't think that the memories of the experiment are his own is because in the 4th game, he's making fun of the idea that the animatronics are dangerous, and I don't think he would be doing that if he went through such a terrifying experience with them in the past. Next up on the list is Andrew. Could Andrew have been an experiment victim? I really like this theory. It explains how he knows what the nightmares look like in Ultimate Custom Night, and it explains why he specifically chose to trap William in a nightmare as a punishment. It makes certain lines a lot more poetic, too.
This time, there is more than an illusion to fear. This is a nightmare that you won't wake from.
This is how it feels, and you get to experience it over and over and over again, forever.
The only problem I have here is Andrew's alligator mask. The fact that he wears such a thing should mean either that he possessed an alligator animatronic, which doesn't seem to be the case, or that he died while wearing this mask. And obviously he wouldn't be wearing it in the experiment room. But maybe it could work out and there's a story behind that mask that we haven't been told yet. I hope so, because this would be such a cool way of tying Andrew into everything. But for now, I'm gonna mark Andrew down as a maybe. Finally, we have the one that would shake things up the most, and yet the one that I've seen discussed by far the least. What if Cassidy was an experiment victim? Now, I know what you're thinking. Why the hell would I come up with such a stupid idea? This is why. This drawing of a black-haired girl in a FNAF 4-styled hospital bed that you have to pass in order to get the nightmare plushie and security breach. I know that still sounds stupid, but that's just what sparked the idea. There's more to it than that, so keep reserving judgment for just a second. Okay, more than a literal second. Cassidy knows about the plastic purple telephone and the Fredbear plush, and she wants to know the crying child's relationship to them. Why? Is it just because she can see into his memories? Well, probably. But what if it isn't? What if it's because she encountered these toys too? Cassidy also makes her first appearance of the Steel Wool era in Curse of Dreadbear, which is filled with references to the experiments in the Bite of 83. It stands to reason that she'd be connected to the two in some way. And while the latter can be explained by her possessing a Fredbear suit, it still ties her to the nightmares, just like the security breach mural did. And finally, we have the one thing that makes me actually take this theory into consideration, rather than seeing it as a silly way of tying a bunch of vague plot points together. And this one thing is the Tales from the Pizzaplex story, Drowning. Drowning is about a black-haired, ghostly girl from a previous time period who's stuck in a video game in the Pizzaplex and hangs out underwater. Gee, where have I heard that one before? The story was honestly kinda boring for the most part, but there was one segment where things got interesting. And I mean really interesting. The protagonist, Kara, one of those two, eventually comes across a recreation of this girl's childhood home. Let me throw a few quotes at you here. To the right was a living area with waterlogged furniture. A torn couch was shifted off to the side. Chairs were thrown about with missing cushions. A rotted coffee table was covered with mold. To the left was another damp sitting room with a brick fireplace that had a crack through the center. Water trickled through the bricks, and a slashed picture hung crookedly on the wall above. Lamps were broken and sunk in water. The next door she entered was on the opposite side of the hallway. Another bedroom, but for grown-ups. There was another bed soaked with water. This one was blood red. Dead roses floated in the puddles on the floor. She wrinkled her nose. It smelled of rotting plants and something coppery. A canopy hung over the bed, with ripped material hanging from the 4 bedposts. There are so many signs of struggle in this house. Sure, some of it can be attributed to a flood, but there's also plenty that can't. Torn couch, tipped chairs, slashed paintings. Everything points to some kind of fight going on here. And that rotting coppery smell in the parents' room is probably old blood, given how it's framed. So we have a situation where someone got hurt and possibly died in the parents' room, and a fight occurred downstairs. I feel like there are 2 things that could have happened here. First, one of the parents killed the other, fought the little girl, and drowned her in the bathtub. Second, an outsider broke in, killed the parents, fought the little girl, and kidnapped her, with the water imagery being more metaphorical for what would happen to her later. Or, maybe there was a Category 5 hurricane. That also works. But could it be that William kidnapped the girl, who is actually Cassidy? Probably not, since it seems like she died at the pizzeria rather than being drowned in an experiment chamber. But it would be really crazy if this is true, and if by some small, tiny chance it is, I want to have it on the record that I called it. Well, that's all I've got. If I missed anyone you think could be an experiment victim, let me know in the comments. Maybe you all will have enough cool ideas to inspire a follow-up video.